Thank you for listening to the Following Films podcast. Today I'm joined by director and showrunner Nancy Schwartzman to discuss Death in Apartment 603, What Happened to Ellen Greenberg. This emotional and gripping docuseries investigates the mysterious death of Ellen Greenberg, a 27-year-old Philadelphia schoolteacher found dead in the apartment she shared with her fiancé on a snowy night in January 2011, just 7 months before her upcoming wedding. Greenberg sustained 20 knife wounds and had 11 bruises on her body in various stages of healing. To the shock of many who knew her, detectives on the scene treated her death as a suicide. But when her autopsy results came back, her cause of death was ruled a homicide. Shortly thereafter, the manner of death was inexplicably reversed to suicide, and the city of Philadelphia shut the case without further investigation. Now, 14 years later, this 3-part docuseries exclusively follows Ellen's parents, Sandee and Josh Greenberg, as they fight to reopen the investigation and learn the truth about their daughter's untimely death. Today's episode of the Following Films podcast is brought to you by Google Workspace. We use Google Workspace to keep things running smoothly and efficiently here at Following Films, and I can't recommend it enough. Try it for your business and see how it can help you stay organized and connected. If you sign up using my link, you'll get a discount, and you'll be supporting the show. Check the show notes for a direct link. Death in Apartment 603, What Happened to Ellen Greenberg, is now streaming on Hulu. I hope you enjoy the show. Thanks. I watched the series, and the first thing that I was curious about with a story like this, how do you decide how many episodes this is going to be, the length of it, and what's dictating that?
Yeah, I mean, that's dictated by ABC Studios and Hulu.
Of course.
Yeah, I think initially, when I came on board, it was a 4-parter, and then part of my immediate task coming in was like, make it a 3-parter on paper. So I was like, okay. And then, I think this happens with a lot of content and shows. You're like midway in, you're like, oh my God, but there's so much. Maybe we need a 4th episode. And in this case, I think, look, it was tight. I mean, especially episode 3, there's so much to cover. And then you have your end cards, and now it's only 40 minutes instead of 43. It's like, holy crap, how are we going to make it all happen? But what I really don't like, and I think most of us creatively feel the same way, is we don't love like a filler episode. Like sometimes a 4-parter is really a 3.5. And I hate repetitive things. I hate when you're like, oh, you're just literally killing time. So I'd rather go in the direction of like, damn, this is like fast moving and dense and layered than, oh, they had to kill 20 minutes, So that was like the initial task, was breaking it and figuring out what your cliffhangers are. And, what episode 3 had to do a lot, because we had to have the story break and go wide at the end of 2. Yeah. And then 3 is like, oh my God, 2019 till right now, plus get everyone's heart back in the game with Ellen, right? So it's like suddenly it becomes a legal procedure. Like it's a story at the beginning, it's a crime in the middle, and then it's like a legal saga at the end. So it's just like was doing a bunch of different things.
It's pretty rare that something that goes beyond an hour that I feel it's justified necessarily. That you do have those where it's sometimes 1 episode, 2 episode, even 3 episodes too long, where it's stretched out. And this, despite being, almost 3 hours of television, but, this is, I guess, 160-ish minutes in that range, that there's no fat on this. You don't feel any sense of wasted space in this narrative, in this story, that it's something that, and I think that is structurally the way that you're breaking this down is really important, because there are the 3 sort of separate arcs throughout, the 3 points of view of the story.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually, they're only like 43-minute episodes. So
okay.
It's 120.
120, so, I'm sorry. Terrible
no, it's
math.
Fine. It feels like you're like 3 hours. With the ABC Hulu format, it's like a little shorter.
Right.
But I actually think that the 6-act structure for TV actually kind of serves pace in a way. And it was new to me. I was coming from, feature length documentaries. And then I did a series prior to this, but there's something, it's a little artificial. You're like shoving in like 6 acts, but it does force you to choose your capsule storytelling carefully and get people moving from one thing to another. If you make a sharp left turn for kind of an emotional beat, you can do that after a very exciting revelatory act. It's kind of interesting. I'm into it more than I thought I would be.
And each one of those breaks has its own arc within that. Yeah. So you're having to kind of tell a story within that, but then leave it so the person wants to come back after the commercial break, which is something that you're saying can feel artificial, but there is something to that pacing that you have to be very deliberate. All filmmaking is artificial. So you're working within a structure. And so this is a very specific structure, though, that oddly enough, I think keeps you moving through it in a way that might feel slightly unnatural, but it is the way a conversation works also. It's the way that we interact with each other. I feel like that format actually does lend itself to storytelling really well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I kind of am much warmer to it than I had been before. And I think it's like forces a kind of a rigor and pace just by like we have a lot to do. But what I never wanted to do in this series was lose sight of Ellen or her family. And I think my editors really did such a beautiful job. 2 of them are parents, they're dads of daughters, and like there are moments where people are like, oh my God, I'm sobbing. And I was like, those are those dads. They brought their, killer, crime or legal nose to the edit. And then all of a sudden the dad comes through and you're like sobbing, And so,
it's devastating. And it's impossible to go through this, in my opinion, and not feel empathy for this family. And you talk about keeping Ellen at the center of this and just to not lose sight of that. How do you balance that with showing the reality of what happened? And because it's gruesome and you have moments, but I feel like you never get into the area of exploitation, which is when you push that too far, but you have to show what happened to some degree.
Yeah, I mean, I think if the city of Philadelphia had said, oh, this is a homicide, we would show probably the extent of the wounding once quickly and move on, just to show actually that this is like overkill. Like it was so extreme. There's 20 stab wounds. So if it had been a close, like, hey, we know what happened here, let's move backwards, I probably would have only shown it once, but because they are calling it a suicide and they're still calling it a suicide, it felt very important to show that Ellen's body is a crime scene.
Yeah.
We need to know what that looks like. This is not theoretical. We're not going to talk about it, but not really know. And, I don't want anyone to be able to skate over it. I want you to see that she had her shoes on. I want you to see what blunt force trauma to the back of the head looks like. And that's really goes against my usual filmmaking. Like I would never do that just to be like, oh, let's really get into the crime and the gore. It's more like, this is insane. This is a really bloody scene. This is a very damaged body. How on earth is this being called a suicide?
Well, and I think that's the difference between exploitation and when you can tell there's intent behind it. That you can feel the voice of the filmmaker, that they're really just trying to show the gravity of this instead of having something that's just shocking for the sake of shock value. You don't feel that here. And I think intent is so important in that.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. Thank you. Because there was, we like definitely debated it, and it was sort of like, no, this is because the body is the evidence. And if it's still, by many people's accounts, like an open-ended thing, then they should see what this looks like.
Well, it doesn't make sense. And I think it helps to get your head around that, to the idea of blunt force trauma to the back of the head, stabbing yourself in places that you can't reach easily, and doing it with that kind of force repeated. It just doesn't line up. And it's very, just from day that it was immediately put into this, classified as suicide, is very interesting. And it's something that you kind of push back on it right away, but then to go as deep into this as you do. I think it just really does ask a lot of questions, which is important in cases like this. Because we don't know, even though it's been settled, we don't know yet at this point. To me personally, how has your opinion on this case changed through the making of this, or has it?
I mean, there are always going to be questions that I don't think we are ever going to be able to answer because there were no cameras in that apartment.
Sure.
Right. I wouldn't rely on someone speaking the truth necessarily. And that's why I love a good camera. So, I think there are just absolutely things that we're not going to know. But I never engage in the kind of speculation that you see. People are like, oh, well, there's this theory here and theory here. And, I really appreciated working with ABC News Studios because the level of rigor of what is expected that is put forward and put on screen is so high and of such journalistic integrity that you're like, we stand by everything we put in. And the people we talk to are experts at the top of their field who are trusted sources. So all of us agree none of this adds up. None of it adds up. And all of us agree that a forensic investigation needs to be done. And there are still things that could be found by doing it. Yes, the crime scene was cleaned, but there's a lot of information. There's a lot of documents that are redacted that could be unredacted. There are absolutely people that could be questioned under oath and rigorously questioned that could shed a lot more light on what could have happened. So I think pulling away from a lot of chatter about kind of speculation and connections and relationships and just looking really carefully at what's there, it's very, very clear that a lot of mistakes were made in the investigation, but there's so many more questions that can be asked. Like, it's not dead in the water. You know what I mean? Like there's a very rich investigation that could be done here.
Well, it's the natural reaction is to start filling in the blanks when there's questions, and that's not what we need to do right now. It's it's just the questions need to be continued to be asked at this point, and that's where you go. That's where the path should lead. It's just that the story that was told, this doesn't make sense. This doesn't line up. We need to reevaluate this, and mistakes are made, and that happens, and things are overlooked, and then people have a tendency to double down, and when they're questioned, they triple and quadruple down. And so until they're pushed. And I hope that this is one of those stories that just opens this back up, that this isn't something that just dead ends here. What are you hopeful for is the impact?
Yeah. I mean, I think we're all hopeful that an outside agency some kind of outside, body or agency could get involved and say, we need to look into this. This doesn't seem right. Or a changing of the guard in terms of leadership positions that might push for a look back.
So you mentioned that this was sort of a new territory for you with coming from documentary feature to work in this serialized television. What was the biggest challenge other than the structure of it in working in that format?
Well, this is my second series, and so thank goodness it wasn't like the first time around, because it is different. I think the pace of turnaround is different. That there was a lot of really strong development that was done on this project before I jumped in. There were some historic interviews with the family over time, which was super helpful. A lot of stuff was filmed on background. So, I mean, the real thing that made it possible was that a court case was already underway, that there had already been depositions in 2029. They were all on Zoom because of COVID, and so they were recorded and we could look at it. Stuff had been entered into evidence so we can use it. So there was all this stuff that you need to make a series, what are your documents and is there a legal proceeding? And then the magic was that, oh my God, the legal proceeding has been moved to February 3rd of this past year. So I started in December. So my first day of shooting was on the halls of City Hall, and it was like, oh my God, let's go. It's really wild. We had initially, the schedule was okay, March, we'll do a week of interviews. And it was like, we need to go to Philly on February 3rd. So we need to line up whatever interviews we can. Who's the most willing? Like, where's the low-hanging fruit? Okay, that's Ellen's best friend, Allison, who's just such a beautiful part of the series, who like leads us.
Yeah.
Really Ellen's voice, that was like, in the beginning, and Debbie Schwab, the cousin, but it was sort of like, then there's just the mechanics of production, which is so, it is what it is. So I guess, on this series, it would have been very hard to do had there not have been so much development. And normally you wouldn't rely on all of those prior interviews. You would do your own, but there wasn't that kind of time. So I think, doing episodic, which I really enjoy, here it was like catching the tail of the unfolding thing while also balancing the look back. It's a 14-year-old case that suddenly is evolving and moving forward the second you show up. So it's, yeah.
Well, oftentimes when you jump into a documentary, you are thinking, well, this is this interesting idea. Let's see where it goes. And you're finding the story as you go. The story's already 90% of the way done, and you're just grabbing onto it and trying to catch up at that point. That's an incredibly fast turnaround for documentary filmmaking. I interviewing several documentarians, 5 years plus is pretty normal for that process. And to have this starting in December and you're going to have your interviews in February, that's not a lot of prep time. And then it's airing and done and in the world already now. That's not even a year for the turnaround on it.
It was nuts. And my first feature doc, Roll Red Roll, was like a 4-year
yeah, exactly.
hand-built thing that of course had a pivot at the last minute. So and I didn't even know what a FOIA was at that point, but so people actually were just talking about like Roll Red Roll, that first film about Steubenville, and they're like, we love, like, you're just so immersed in the town and you really feel it. And I'm like, yeah, because we had days and days to kick around and film all this stuff to like really build the town piece. And I'm grateful that people feel Philadelphia as a character in the Ellen Greenberg story. And I'm like, I think that's just because everyone has a Philly accent, but awesome. We have thoughts, but, I think someone also said Philly's always a character. If Philly's ever there, like
Philly gets saddled with a lot of things. I don't think anyone has ever said it's lacking in character, though. That's something you cannot accuse that city of.
No, I'm from there, so
I'm from Delaware, so it's not Philadelphia, but adjacent, where I spent a lot of time there. So
so the Delco area,
of course.
Stuff. So but I love bringing in the place and bringing in that element. And I think everybody's attitude and amazing personality, like our guy, DeAndrea, the former district attorney, 88, he's amazing. Yeah. There's like a lot of Philly energy in the project.
I personally find it just utterly charming, and I love it. It reminds me of home. I live in Arizona now, so it's an abrasive charm that I love, that I miss so much.
I could barely keep up. I've lost my edge in terms of like people talking so fast. I was like, oh my God, I cannot follow you. Can you slow? Like, what has my brain gone soft out in LA? Like, I'm like, slow down, But like, Philly, it's like a mile a minute, super fast. Yeah. So I got my, the Eagles obviously won the Super Bowl, and I got my bomber for the beginning of filming. So that was a great way into town. If I have my Birds jacket on, then
I think it's required to represent the Birds if you're going to be there. So absolutely. Well, Nancy, I know we're at time right now, but thank you so much for taking the time to do this. Congratulations on the show. I think this is something that's really special. I think it's not only something that is entertaining, it's something that's important as well. So I definitely recommend people who haven't seen it to check out the series, because it's a story we need to share.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Right. Take care, Nancy. Thank you.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.
Time enough to figure you out. Time enough to write this down. Wish me luck. Give me hope. voice crack.